Just in case you missed it, it's the top 5 sports talkers of the day. Now, it's time for Dan Barrero's Top 5 at 5.
Robert Smith is scheduled to join at about 5:30. Who is Duke's all-world basketball player?
Cooper Flagg.
Cooper Flagg, apparently, I just watched the video, turned his ankle.
Yes.
I don't think it's the kind of thing that's going to keep him out forever, but they are basically saying he's done for the ACC tournament, correct?
Yeah, that's what...
Which makes sense why you don't rush him back, right?
No.
I mean, he's the franchise.
He is, and they're national championship contender, as you would imagine. So with selection on Sunday, and first-round games starting a week from today, I don't think Duke's going to be in the first 4 on Tuesday and Wednesday night. Yeah, you rest him.
Did you notice the crowd size in Indy today? Actually, even with Indiana playing, was it the first or second day of the second game of the day?
They played the first game against Oregon.
And
paltry.
It was weak.
Yep. Thank you.
It was I'm not really sure that's a statement about Indianapolis. I think it's a statement about IU basketball at this point. With their lame duck coach Mike Woodson. I think they had like about 5,000-6,000 people in the gym.
That's the tweet that I saw from
and they lost.
Some reputable national reporter.
Oregon has been red hot. Oregon's played well lately, and Indiana might not be in the tournament at all. I think they're considered what we in the business call a bubble team.
Yep.
Bozic wasted no time writing another "This is why Woodson had to go" column. Don't bug me with, it's unfair. He really does deserve more time. He just destroyed him again. And he had it written like 8 minutes after the game.
Those have been in the drafts.
That's probably true, yeah.
Those have been in the drafts.
Yeah. Anyway.
Let's start with college basketball then, because we limped in there. We learned late last night, early this morning, that Mark Coyle has made the move.
There's the next Gopher coach.
Is that Brian Dutcher?
No, Tom Crean on the panel. Bracketology, ESPN.
I've been watching the Mountain West tournament. I just watched Patino and Tim Miles battle, and now San Diego State's playing Boise, so Brian Dutcher's on the screen.
Well, we'll talk about that later, because the Brian Dutcher name, it comes up every time, and then anything seems to happen. I don't even think it's going to come up this time.
It's not coming up this time.
I was hoping, this is how sick I am.
Ben Johnson got fired, by the way. We're leading into it. After 4 seasons, last night when the team got back from Indianapolis.
My hope was, this is probably mean, but my hope was that USC would lose its first round Big Ten game last night, and that USC would just say, if you want to go to Minnesota, just go. We'll release you. We're not even asking for a buyout. After 1 year at USC, you can go. Unfortunately, USC won. So who'd they beat? I think they beat
I don't even remember. Rutgers.
So they're playing later tonight in another game.
What about a staff of Eric Musselman, Brian Dutcher, Ryan Saunders?
Bring them all in. Oh, gosh.
Saul Smith.
You know what you wouldn't need to do? Get a new arena. The barn would be sold out.
Would it be rocking?
All the old people would come back just for that.
Seriously.
They'd know all those names.
They would. Oh, yeah, I got to be missing somebody.
You probably are.
I got to be missing somebody's kin, somebody's next generation that, could coach here. So anyway, that's what happened last night. We've talked a little bit about that. We'll talk more about it. But on the basketball side of things, does any of it even matter anymore now that the Timberwolves are back? The perfect test at the perfect time is what I believe the head coach Chris Finch said last night. And the Wolves passed it with flying colors. I was sitting there, Dan, in awe last night going, Denver's just not going to make a run. Or they did make a little bit of a run, late first half, then early in the second half. And the Wolves just kept shoving them away. Just one-arm shiver. Forearm shiver away. They end up winning 115-95. Wasn't that close. For a second time this season, Michael Malone has gone no mas on it and just pulled everybody. He played Joker to start the fourth quarter, which he doesn't typically do.
He hates doing that,
unless
but
he needs to.
Yeah.
He had to, and none of it mattered because the Wolves were clinical. I can't believe how fast they are playing, how fast the ball is moving. Guys are flying all over the place. They're dropping behind-the-back passes. Randall looks quicker. Edwards, by the way, had 29. Everybody was in on the action. Randall with 25. Jaden with 16. Dante had 10 points off the bench. Just another decisive victory over Denver. who doesn't have much for the Wolves right now. It's
No.
5 straight victories.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, have we just reached a point where it's the proverbial cliche that the Wolves have the Denver number for one reason or another. Part of what struck me, and we talked about this, Mike Conley joined us right off the top of the show, and we got into the pacing, which was a big part of what he has enjoyed, what he has seen from several players, including Julius Randle. What continues to strike me is how much depth this team does have if they will take advantage of it.
Yeah.
And Denver has no depth. Now, Denver was out one starter.
Yep.
So
Aaron Gordon.
So that's part of their issue. But as I'm watching that game, that's what struck me. We're coming in with reinforcements that all, to varying degrees, are interesting or have something to offer. And part of the reason they have something to offer is they've had a chance to play a little bit more because of the injuries here. Denver is thin. So I hope, and Conley agreed with this, the postseason is supposed to be about, shortening your bench, and you use your starters more. You go Tibbs on the bit. More on that later. I hope we don't, because I think we can use that to wear some damn good teams down. Now, there's a couple other teams that are awfully deep, including Oklahoma City, which won the first game of the day in Boston. They had a very impressive victory. But that's what I want to see. And what I like is, I don't know where this is going, but literally, this is the first time all season where you said, oh, I kind of get it now. I kind of see it.
Yep.
They are a good watch again. They are figuring out how to play together, and a lot of it's probably going to depend on matchups. They still have a lot of ground to cover, but that feeling is back. They have recaptured a little bit of that feeling. Like, yeah, there's some there. There's something going on there that's worth paying attention to. And that's no small, mean feat based on what we saw earlier in this season.
They're back at home tomorrow night against the Orlando Magic. To your point about the depth in the minutes, Anthony Edwards played the most minutes for the Timberwolves last night, 35. Only 2 starters played 30-plus minutes for the Wolves. Well, I guess Rudy played 30, so that's 3. The fewest minutes for a Denver starter, 33.
Oh, 30,
Porter
okay.
Jr. Westbrook, who actually played pretty well.
Yeah, he did.
And Christian Brown, 33 minutes. Joker played 38. Jamal Murray played 35. And that's with taking them out with 5 minutes to go in the game. Like, all 5 starters played 33-plus minutes for Denver. Ant was the most for us with 35.
We play with a great deal of confidence against Denver, and that's because we have dominated them so much, and that also is kind of built on itself. So we're back home now, right? Don't we have a homestand?
Yes, Orlando Friday.
Right.
And then there's another game Sunday night as well, I think against Utah. What was your favorite at Ingram moment? We'll wrap up the top 5 at 5 with that. The former second-round draft pick, the guard, 2022, has been traded to Houston, gun belt tight, for a 6th-rounder in next year's draft. And the Vikings would like to find a trade partner for Garrett Bradbury. That news broken by Shefty about an hour ago. But will release him if they can't find a trade partner. He became kind of the odd man out, as we all speculated, when the Vikings signed Ryan Kelly, or agreed to terms with Ryan Kelly earlier this week.
Yeah, and Bradbury was a 1, Ingram was a 2,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to if at some point you just have to acknowledge it and move on. There's no point in pretending that these guys are worth keeping. They have upgraded in both cases, but it is a reminder, the best way to do this is to draft a little more effectively so you're not in that position, and maybe you can use the money for something else as well, because when you're giving up on a 1 and a 2 in both cases, that's not good. Top 5 at 5 wrapped up. We'll come back with a very special ode to a dead guy. Robert Smith will join at 5:30. So from the time you've been around him, from your observations of his time in Washington, who is Kirk Cousins? Because as odd as this sounds, 13 games into his first season here, we're still trying to figure it out.
My honest answer is the old Bill Parcells line, you are what your record says you are.
Yeah.
He's been a starting quarterback for 4 years. I think his record right now is exactly 500 with his 3 years in Washington and now the 6-6-1. He might be 1 game under, but it's right around exactly 500. I think that's who Kirk Cousins is. He's not a bad quarterback. He's a good enough quarterback that if you have a very good defense, which the Vikings certainly have had, or have appeared to have, certainly did last year. You can win with Kirk Cousins just as they won last year with Case Keenum. Case Keenum's not a great. I think Case Keenum and Kirk Cousins are similar as quarterbacks. And the Vikings were 13-3 a year ago with Case Keenum as their quarterback. I think Kirk Cousins is very capable of leading a team into the playoffs. Whether he's capable of leading a team to the Super Bowl, I'm not sure. Because he does make mistakes. He tends to make mistakes at critical times.
And now, it's time for Ode to a Dead Guy.
Well, you heard a John Feinstein appearance on our program, obviously a number of years ago. Generally, when we had John on, it would largely be talking about either college basketball, maybe even the tournament this time of year, or his latest book, or if another book that was out in hardcover 2 years before has now come out in paperback. And the story broke this morning, stunning, horrific news that John has died at the age of 68 years old, apparently collapsing at his brother's home this morning. We have been fortunate enough on this show over the decades to have some absolutely marvelous guests. I can't say enough about our guest lineup, and we've lost way too many. And part of that is we're all getting older, except I look at John Feinstein's age and I say, 68, are you kidding me? That's way, way, way too young. And, I'm glad earlier in the show, Sean Salisbury brought up his name. Feinstein he started as an Inkstain wretch. He was a newspaper writer. In fact, I think he was a police reporter part-time at the Washington Post. He worked his way up and ultimately became a very successful sports writer there. And then he became a best-selling author. And, of course, the book that kind of opened the door to his career, took him to the next level, was called A Season on the Brink. And it was a year with my guy, Robert Montgomery Knight, following the Indiana Hoosiers. And it became a massive bestseller. It was the 85-86 basketball season is when this was. Season on the Brink. Controversial at the time. Knight was very unhappy with him because of what he included in the book. And that just opened the door to what? I think he upwards of close to 50 books.
48, I think, was the final number. 20-some bestsellers.
And as it's eerie. I mean, if you get online now, you might need a subscription, but if you get online or if you have a subscription to the Washington Post and you get online to WashingtonPost.com, you will find a column that John Feinstein filed yesterday on college basketball. In fact, it's a celebration of Tom Izzo winning another Big Ten title and why Izzo, compared to a number of coaches of his era, continues to want to coach. It's classic Feinstein. He lays it out all very, very nicely. And, beyond that, I mean, we've had him on. We've also had him on other subjects sometimes where there wasn't necessarily a natural peg. When Ben Bradley died,
yep,
we had him on because he worked for Ben Bradley, obviously, at the Washington Post. My only regret, and you can speak to this. I mean, there were a couple times where John was actually lobbying you to be on more often. The idea of maybe having him on a little bit more regularly. And we talked about it. Sometimes it's just hard to do because you got to fit a lot of different people in. But he's one of those guys, and this is what I think why our guests are so damn good. Most of them can speak on almost anything, right? They may have their specialties. They may have their things that they're kind of known for, but they're just good. They're articulate. They have interesting things to say. Sometimes have controversial things to say. They're often opinionated, but they have plenty. You just say, name a subject, and they can almost always riff on it, and that was certainly the case with him.
I was thinking about him yesterday because it is that time of year that we would have him on a lot, or I would see him at the Final Four. He would come on at the Final Four or Masters stuff because college basketball and golf were kind of his two big ones. And he hadn't been as prevalent on social media as he had been, historically. I think a lot of that has to do with politics. He would get spun up on what was going on in the Trump world. He was no fan of the current president, which he never shied away from.
He would get sidetracked.
But I think for his own mental health, he used to tweet all the time. I think he just got off of it. And I was literally thinking about him yesterday. And this one, I mean, for me, I know it's devastating for you because you go way back with him. That's part of the reason why we had him on. But this was one of the guys that, it's not hyperbole to say, got me going on this entire career.
Remember that. Yes,
because
you said that.
For someone like me who was always wanted to know what's going on behind the closed doors, his books were like gold.
He helped to make you more of a reader, did he not?
I've probably read 30 of his books.
Yeah.
And I started reading them in high school. Those and like Mitch Albom's Fab Five.
Yep.
Those types of books that get you into the locker room. The part we're going to play is when he came in studio for the book in Hazeltine. And it was just such a thrill to get to know him after growing up reading him and sitting with him at the Ryder Cup or interviewing him in Army Navy. He wrote an unbelievable Army Navy book. That was something he never stopped doing. He worked for both Army and Navy radio and television networks over the years. It was a super important bit to him. Nordo and I had great conversations with him there. It was hard to see that today because I was honestly thinking about him yesterday and going, I haven't seen much from him, haven't heard much from him. And it doesn't sound like he was sick or anything. It sounds like this was very sudden. But I knew this was about the time where we're usually going to have him on. And it was always so good. And he'd answer the phone the exact same way, and he always
utterly motivated.
He'd always come on. Yeah, this one's a real bummer.
It's a gut punch, man.
He's a great guy.
I mentioned this with Salisbury. He obviously was connected with some of the biggest names in sports, including Bob Knight, including Mike Krzyzewski, including Dean Smith. You can go, including Red Auerbach, by the way, because he had an interesting. I think it was basically an audio collection of his interviews with Red Auerbach. Let me tell you a story.
Yep, that's just another great book.
Gold mine of stuff. But what set him apart, too, was once he became big, it allowed him to say, no, I want to do little stories, quote unquote. A Civil War, Army versus Navy. You mentioned that.
Incredible.
He had the opportunity to do exactly that kind of, where nobody knows your name, life in the minor leagues of baseball. I remember when we talked to him about that book. That came out about 10 years ago. The Last Amateurs, a look at the 1999-2000 basketball season in the Patriot League, a low-ranked NCAA Division I basketball conference.
And in that book, he was so big, as the story goes, he got them to move their championship game time because it was conflicting.
That's right. Yes.
It was conflicting with something else, and him having no shame or problem saying, look, I need you to move this game to 4. I don't remember the story, but there was something else he needed to be at earlier in the day. And he got them to move the title game because he goes, look, the book needs the title game. I'm John Feinstein. I need to be there for the title game.
Too good.
And they moved it. They moved the title game so that he could be there.
That's power.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. All right, so what are we going to listen to here?
We're going to listen to his in-studio appearance when he came back the year after the 2016 Ryder Cup. The first major was the book that he wrote. He was doing an appearance at Hazeltine and then a bunch of bookstores around town. But it's just a little bit about that book, where he was embedded with both USA and Europe for the 2016 Ryder Cup at Hazeltine. It's about 4 minutes.
Another perception issue going into this particular Ryder Cup, and I want to expand it out a little bit, was this sense that, Europeans, they just seem to know how to have fun. Their players are loosey-goosey, and they're together, and they're having a good time, and we're anal and tight and constipated. And is that a story, again, that's told each time we lose, or do you think it does relate to why we were losing?
The story is completely accurate until Hazeltine. On the European side, Ian Poulter had one of the best lines. He said, we're the same as the Americans. There are guys who like each other, guys who don't like each other. But for 1 week, we leave all that outside the door. And then when the week is over, we all think Monty's a jerk. and that's pretty accurate. And Colin Montgomery was a great Ryder Cup player. And he himself said the reason he and Faldo always played together was because nobody else wanted to play with them. So they ended up playing with one another, and they were a pretty darn good team. But the U.S. team, and a lot of it, I don't want to be unfair about this, but a lot of it had to do with Tiger Woods. Because Tiger's father always said to him, you're there to kick everybody's butt. You're there to win majors. They're the enemy. You don't have friends in that locker room. And Tiger was always, he'd be friend, hi, how are you? But he was very standoffish, and everybody knew how competitive he was, which was part of his greatness. But Phil Mickelson said, metaphorically, and of course he and Phil didn't get along for the longest time, and although they now downplay it. It's like John Thompson and Morgan Wooten in Washington. For years, didn't speak to one another. Morgan, great high school coach at DeMatha. John, of course, Hall of Fame. Both Hall of Famers. And then John started doing radio and Morgan was retired. And Morgan would come on the radio show, and John would say, "Oh, they always exaggerated about how much we didn't like each other." And Morgan would say, "Absolutely." and I remember what John once said to me, because Morgan had a lot of great players. John never recruited any of them. He said, "There are some people on the earth you can live apart from." But then they became best friends. Phil and Tiger, a little bit like that. But Phil said that when Tiger's dad died,
I remember that quote. I was about to bring that up in the piece, in the book.
He felt like Tiger, without Earl looking over his shoulder, began to loosen up and began to become more one of the guys. And in this particular Ryder Cup, when he wasn't playing, interestingly, when he was a vice captain, he became one of the guys and was very involved in the whole thing. Davis always talked, "Oh, Tiger's involved." And I was like very skeptical. Then I started talking to the players, and they were saying, Brant Snedeker told me that Tiger, after he made the team, Tiger was calling him so often to talk about matchups and who you should play with and what number you should go in singles, that it got to the point where he finally said, "Tiger, you need a hobby," because he was obsessed with it. And remember, he'd only been on one winning Ryder Cup team, 99 in Boston. And there was also there was an influx of younger players. Everybody gets along with Ricky Fowler. I think part of Ricky Fowler's problem is that he's like Davis. He's a little bit too nice a guy. But everybody loves Ricky Fowler. Everybody loves Jordan. I mean, because Jordan's unique. He's uniquely smart, uniquely mature, took a leadership role on this team. Mickelson and Davis both said the most important non-golf moment to them was when Jordan got up and spoke to the team on Thursday night in the team room before the matches started Friday. And there wasn't as much scar tissue. There weren't guys who'd been on 4 and 5 and 6 losing Ryder Cup teams other than Mickelson. And so, but the most telling thing to me, ultimately, when I talked to everybody after the week was over, for years, the Americans would come in to their pre-tournament press conferences and they talk about playing ping pong. "Oh, we love each other. We're playing ping pong. You should see Tiger and Phil playing ping pong together." Blah, blah, blah. They didn't want to talk to one another. So they played ping pong. There were 2 ping pong tables in the U.S. team room. Matt Kuchar, who was the best ping pong player there, told me they were used twice in the week. That tells you they were having a good time together, and that was different.
Excellent selection, Gaardsy. John Feinstein, when he was in studio with us, how long ago would that be?
I think that was 2017, the year after 2016's Ryder Cup.
If you're just joining us, the news breaking this morning, sad news that regular contributor to this show, all-world writer and reporter, I might add, a big part of it, John Feinstein, has died suddenly at the age of 68 years old this morning. 701 in the 402 guy writes this: "Sad day. You have a Mount Rushmore of deceased basketball-related guests. Feinstein, Walton, Flip, Majerus. Incredible." To which I say I am beyond appreciative of being able to share those individuals with our audience over the last several decades, and it is indeed a very sad day. Back in a minute with Robert Smith. Well, I guess we should start our conversation with Robert Smith by passing along a hello from an individual he knows very well who joined us at 3:30 today and joins us every week, actually, during the football season. Sean Salisbury said hello to Robert Smith. He also said, Robert, that in the time it takes to do like 2 or 3 segments, he could go from his house to your house in Texas. Is that true, or is that a slight exaggeration? Robert Smith? Going once?
Oh,
there we go.
Sorry.
There we go. We got you now.
It works much better with the mute button off.
Did you hear my question, or was that also muted?
Yeah. So, no, that wasn't muted. I'll never mute you, Dan. 2 to 3 segments? No. You see, he thinks that I still live in Spring.
Ah, that's right. He did say that.
I don't live in Spring. Is the north end of Houston. And by the way, to all your wonderful listeners out there, go ahead and Google Houston and state of Connecticut, because the third outer belt from Houston, which is where Spring and the Woodlands are, the radius of the state I know it's not a circle, but it's basically the edge. It's like from the center to the edge of Connecticut. It's unbelievable how big Houston is. But I'm in Dallas now, so.
That's what I thought, but I thought, well, maybe you'd moved since. I wasn't sure, so who knows. Anyway, he said hello.
Yeah,
he did say hello. He spoke very highly of you and wanted us to pass along a salutation.
Sean's the best. I'll never forget going to his house when I was a rookie. You know, when apart from the joke that they play on the rookies with the turkey thing.
Yes.
I don't know if do they still do that? Do you know if they still do that?
This is the culture. It's the culture of collaboration, Robert. I don't think we do that now. We're much too nice to do those sorts of things, I think. But although I'm not sure.
It was pretty funny. You know, they have the video, the camera set up at the store because they tell the rookies to go get their turkeys, and then they film the rookies at the store. And they were just there were just too many people asking me to go get my turkey. I was very suspicious. So, fortunately I didn't fall for it, but I did go over to Sean Salisbury's house for Thanksgiving, when I was a rookie. He was kind enough to invite me over to his place then.
That's nice of him. Yeah, that's very. Were there a bunch of you there, or were you the only player?
Well, he's a player too.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
I think I was the only other player, honestly. But it was awesome.
Good.
Love Sean.
Yeah, he's been great with us over the years. Here's my toss-up question to you. You get a phone call tonight, out of nowhere, from KOC, and he says, Sean, you're not Sean. That was earlier. You're Robert. I should ask Sean the same question. Robert, I'm buried in my office. I got all the lights off because I want everybody to think I'm back home, but I'm actually still here trying to figure out plotting the future of this team at quarterback. Aaron Rodgers desperately wants to come here. He doesn't want to go to Pittsburgh. He certainly doesn't want to go to the Giants. But am I stupid to actually consider taking this plunge into the deep end? What would the Robert Smith advice be?
Oh, I absolutely would have to think you'd consider it. And, so much of what we discuss around these types of stories is obviously from an information disadvantage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Only he knows what that relationship is like, with Aaron. And I'm sure he's not scared of coaching him. And with his type of talent, even with the drop-off that's naturally going to occur after age 40, and obviously the mobility isn't what it once was, you would have to consider it. Even with all of the things that many of us think about what a headache he must be. Those are our thoughts and not necessarily the thoughts of a coach that actually is charged with making his team better.
Yes.
Right? That's his job.
Right.
And if he can make your team better, I don't really care what anybody outside of the building has to say about it. If I think he's going to make our team better, and I think I can deal with him personally,
that's the key.
Yeah. I mean, that's all that matters.
That's the key. Well, the theory that I offered up was it yesterday or maybe it was even the day before, was that if you're KOC, I think part of what might attract you, and the number one thing would have to attract you, is he's still good enough, right, to make a difference. But beyond that, I think for KOC, it's, I have this rep. The rep is, I'm not into the whole creative tension thing like Mike Zimmer. I don't like trouble. I don't want difficulty. I don't want those kinds of headaches. I'll show you. I'll take on the guy who's at least perceived to be one of the biggest headaches in the history of the National Football League, and I'll conquer his ass. I'll have him melting at my feet, getting the best out of him. To me, human nature being what it is, that might be what attracts him, but you got to think he's still got enough football in him, right? Because if he doesn't, then the rest of that stuff is kind of silly.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have to believe that, but that cultural part of it, like that sounds more like the decision that Bill Belichick was making, bringing in Randy Moss.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, just with kind of what I've gathered, between KOC and Kwesi, just kind of the feel of the organization over the last few years, Aaron just seems like he just seems like the polar opposite of everything that they stand for. But that's me making decisions and judgments from afar,
Yeah.
right? I don't
think you're wrong about that.
Personally.
Yeah, I think you're right on in that regard.
I mean, I'm sure that there are, but I can't think offhand of a guy that would be a worse fit, especially at that position and what it means to be a leader inside of the locker room and selfless, completely selfless. I mean, that, and again, these are judgments from afar, and judgments made in a situation which certainly had more problems than Aaron Rodgers in New York.
Yeah. Well, I've admitted this, in my more honest moments that, and this won't shock you because of how far back we go. You know me a little bit. That part of my attraction to this story, and much to the chagrin, by the way, if he did an unofficial, like an unscientific poll of people who text this show every day, and that's a considerable number, I would say it's 90-10, maybe 80-20 against even considering this. I mean, people have yelled at me like, why are you even talking about this? Why are you giving this oxygen? What are you doing? Well, I've admitted, Robert, that for me, some of it is I want the story. So I just anticipate the moment he would land here, it would be the biggest story that Vikings have seen probably since Favre got here. And it'll either be an unbelievable smashing success where people go, my God, he did have more left. He really did. Or it'll be death and destruction, right? And it'll just be a complete disaster. And I tend to like those extremes. I'm sorry, but that's the way I operate.
No. I mean, that's perfectly understandable. It's the job that you have, and man, it would be fun. And I think back to Brett Favre, and obviously when I was a player, Brett Favre was playing for the Packers, and I hated him in I would say like a childish way, like a juvenile. Like right. I couldn't stand like. And you know how it is when the Packers come into town for a game up there in Minnesota. It's hard to tell if it's a home game sometimes because so many people have given their tickets away.
Yes.
And he would walk onto the field, and it was like this visceral reaction that I had, like, God, I can't stand that guy for no reason. Right? And it was funny because it was funny when the Vikings signed him. It was just like. I didn't go so far as to buy a Favre jersey, but I became a Brett Favre fan immediately. And if Aaron Rodgers became a Viking, I guarantee you that I would find a way to see past his flaws, rationalize all the statements. Yeah, well, he sounded like this, but this is the I would be all for it. I'd be all in, and I say that as shamelessly as you say that you're just in it for the controversy or the good or the bad that becomes of it.
Yeah, and again, I think it's still far less likely that it's going to happen here than the other two places. Clearly, the Giants want him. They're desperate. I don't think he would want to go there if he could avoid it because they're kind of a mess. Pittsburgh, to me, looks like he's got a chance, right? Yeah, I mean, you got at least a chance to do something. But if you're Rodgers, this was Salisbury's point, and I agree with this. If you're Rodgers, you want here, right? Because this is your best chance, even more than Pittsburgh, to be a factor almost immediately. And I would submit, I don't know how closely you paid attention to the free agency moves that the Vikings have made. They've had a hell of a run, I think, at least on paper, right? Adding two meat and potatoes, man. I'm on a meat and potatoes football guy, offensive and defensive lines, and they added two on both sides of the ball. And these are all accomplished players. I'm going... Yeah, if I'm Aaron, this is the place that gives me the best chance to look good, even if I don't have that much left.
Yeah, well, and there's the indoor factor.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is huge, right? I mean, do you want consistent footing for a 41-year-old quarterback that tore his Achilles tendon 2 years ago come December? Yeah, all the home games I can get with, that incredible environment up there. I would love it. So, if you're him, generally speaking, I would think that it's the best situation. But again, it's so hard for me. It's so hard for me to kind of picture those two working together well. But by the same token, Aaron obviously is a smart guy, and he understands what you can and can't get away with in certain situations. And just seems to me that Kevin O'Connell's the same way, and that for that to happen, there would have to be a clear understanding of the chain of command and what would certainly not be tolerated.
Part of what has fueled this, I think, Robert, is that the reporters who cover this team, who I trust, we have a couple of them on the air every week. They're not sensational. They are solid. And they say, look, I'm not being told by anybody I trust that they're definitely doing this. But what's interesting is nobody will tell me what I would think they would be ready to. Stop this. We have we're not interested in this. That there's something they keep hearing, that there's at least discussion going on inside the building. That still doesn't mean it's going to happen. But I think that's what's kind of fueled a lot of this stuff, is that, and they have not gone out now that Daniel Jones has gone elsewhere, and they need another quarterback, even if it's just to be a number 2. They haven't signed any of those available quarterbacks, and that's also fueled. Well, if you were going to if you're not interested in the Rodgers thing at all, just go to the one, find the veteran that you're interested in, and go ahead and sign him to be the backup, to be the insurance, and that hasn't happened either. Let me ask you about Darnold, because obviously he's gone. We know that. He ends up getting, I think, a better deal than I'd been led to believe by the reporters the last few weeks. Do you have any second thoughts about the Vikings not entertaining the idea of trying to bring him back at a similar deal? Do you think the Vikings sort of had to do what they ultimately did in this case? Said, we love you, we appreciate the work, we helped elevate you, but we're going to let you free because we're just not interested in paying that kind of money. We like the rookie contract with JJ, and we want to start the JJ era. What do you think?
Yeah, and remember, part of that has to be from Darnold's side as well, and I'm sure Darnold's very grateful, by the way, for KOC and the Vikings organization for bringing him in and kind of allowing him to get to this point. But I'm sure he made it very clear with them. He said, look, I need a multi-year deal. Got to be, maybe it was a minimum. I got to have a minimum of 3 years. And you just couldn't do that.
Right.
They couldn't commit to that. And Darnold didn't want to take what they likely said was, hey, we'd love to have you back, but it's 1 year or nothing. Mm-hmm. And I think that they didn't feel that going up to the franchise number was appropriate, and so they did, I think, what made the most sense for everybody involved.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that they did the right thing. And it's hard, it's hard to say, like, we'll see, right?
Yeah, sure.
We'll see how it turns out. But I think they did the right thing with Sam.
Aaron, I should say, Robert Smith is joining us. Aaron Rodgers would be a good guest. I mentioned to Gaardsy, if we can get him on, that'd be good. But I think he's used to massive coin.
McAfee?
Yeah, McAfee. If he's going to say anything, it's going to probably be. And that's another thing that we talked about this with Salisbury. If wherever he goes, that's what a coach and his organization has to deal with, right? You never know what's going to go viral every week from what A-Rod has to say on that show, right? He clearly loves, at this point, playing the role. My only thought was, is it possible he's been humbled enough from last year that he might actually say, all right, I want to preserve my legacy, and to do that, I am going to try to back away from some of this stuff and just concentrate more on the football. I don't know if that's too much to ask at this point. He's so used to that. I mean, he's becoming as much a brand as a QB, yep. Right? I mean, that's the change, I think, to Rodgers over the years.
Yeah, and that's really the fascinating part to think about. And I think that is perfectly reasonable, what you just said. And people might say humble. I mean, how dare you even mention Aaron Rodgers and humble in the same sentence? And I think that especially just how poorly it went over the last 2 years, tearing the Achilles tendon, third, fourth play, third play of that first game 2 years ago, and then the disaster last year. I think that, and for people that would say, oh, he's not going to want to come back now, or that maybe it's time to walk away, you're looking at both sides of the ego there. I think that his ego is such, or maybe his desire to preserve his legacy is such that he would humble himself. So I know that sounds contradictory, but
not really.
I think, I really do believe that's going on in his head. He's saying, no way am I going out like that, and I'm going to go and do what I need to do. And I'm sure that the coaches, in all of those potential locations, and maybe even locations we haven't thought of, who knows, would make it clear to him that, we'd love to have you, but, right? So, I think he's definitely had that thought.
You had a tweet just within the last, I want to say 2 or 3 days, regarding your, I guess, I don't say relationship so much as your feelings about Stephen A. Smith. Stephen A. Smith has been, big in the news lately. He had his kind of sideline deal, the courtside deal with LeBron. He just signed a pretty good deal. I think most people in the media would agree. 5 years, $100 million, where everybody else is downsizing, and he's getting a deal like that. What was the? Tell me about the Robert Smith tweet. You're Robert Smith. The tweets regarding Stephen A. and how you've kind of come a long way regarding your feelings about him once upon a time. Yeah.
So when I got to ESPN, this is like 2005, and I can't remember if I met him that year. It might have been the next year, 2006 or so. And by that point, I had been 10 or so years working in the union and next to Gene Upshaw.
Right.
By the way, and I mentioned this in the tweet, like before I got involved with the union, I wanted to fire him. I was one of those guys that just believed everything that I heard about him. And because it affected me personally, in that we were the first rookie class to get paid less than the rookie class the year before. And I remember Gino Torretta, the 7th round pick that year.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were the anarchists in the room when Gene showed up, and we were yelling and making all kinds of fuss. And Jack Del Rio and myself became union reps the next year. He was the rep, and I was his assistant, almost with the express purpose of going out to get Gene fired. And we found out that a big reason why less money was in the system, a huge amount of money was taken out of the system to add guys to the pension that had never received pensions. So when the pension was first formed in the mid-'70s, those guys had decided not to include players that played before 1959 so that they could get higher pensions. So Gene Upshaw's like, oh, we can't have that. We got to add these guys. Let's take some of this money from the settlement, take it away from the rookies partially, and add these guys, especially because, it's really expensive to do that, and went to a lot of families, survivors, surviving spouses. And like I said that day, I'm going to work for the union as long as they'll have me. And here we are 31 years later, and I'm still working for the union in some capacity. And, I went into ESPN with that knowledge, right? And that it's fairly unique in that not everybody there knows that kind of stuff. And I heard Stephen A. saying things like, oh, yeah, Gene Upshaw needs to be fired, terrible, doing what he's doing and all this kind of stuff. And he comes up to me the first time that I was there, that he saw me. He comes in the room, he's dapping everybody up, and he comes up to me, and I just sit there. I don't even reach my hand out, shake his hand, just kind of shake my head. Phony, tough guy, juvenile type crap, right? That's and that's what I'll call it what it is. Like, it was me trying to show up Stephen A. Because I didn't know Stephen A., but I knew Stephen A. didn't know Gene, so he shouldn't go on air with my estimation and say all these things. Long story short, Stephen and I became really close. And I got to tell you, man, one of the most disappointing parts of being in the media is seeing how many people in the media really don't care about the truth. They would rather just spout off about what they want to talk about and even when they're presented with the evidence that contradicts what they believe, they'll just go and just be loud. That's not Stephen A. Stephen A. is loud. He's very good at what he does. He's a showman, but he wants to know the truth. And I think one of the worst things for Stephen A. in his mind is to actually say something that isn't true. And we spent a lot of time, me giving him more information about the background, and whenever there was an opportunity to clear up some of those issues, he gave me that chance, would bring me on his show to talk about those things. That's the kind of guy he is. And I don't know all the back channel stuff of what's going on with LeBron, but I know that when it comes to truth in the media, there are a few people that work as hard as Stephen A. to get to it. He's going to make a lot of mistakes because he talks about everything.
Yep.
And you know how difficult.
Yeah, for sure.
Basically go on air and talk about all these different sports and all of the time that it takes. But there's nobody that works harder or cares more about getting to the truth than Stephen A.
I think that's very well said. Gaardsy, were you and I talking about this? I can't remember. No, maybe it was somebody else on air about this very thing, or maybe it was a guest that, look, when you are, because he is loud. There's no question. A lot of times, especially in my business, then the brethren would be, well, he's just shouting. And it's a challenge to get past that because it's a style not everybody loves, and it can wear on you, for sure. But there is a lot more to him, I think. I agree totally on that than just sort of the sort of surface analysis of him over a period of time. And like you say, I don't always agree with everything he says, and he's not going to always get everything right. But I do think he's more earnest about that. I like to think it still goes back to the fact he started out as a sports writer, man. The guy covered high schools in New York.
Yeah.
And I still think that's his base, and so I think that kicks in every now and again.
Yeah. And Stephen Dubner, he's the author of Freakonomics, or co-author of Freakonomics. So I did a podcast with Stephen a couple of months ago. We were talking about the running back market, and I loved the book. I read it when it first came out, and spent a lot of time, talking with him about different topics, that never made it to air, right? And he talked about Stephen A. And he had met Stephen A. I think it was at CNN or something. This is before he even got to ESPN, or certainly before he became the figure that he has become at ESPN. And he just talked about just how hard Stephen A. worked and how meticulous he was in his preparation for the segment, and even up to the time of the segment. And I said, yeah, that sounds like Stephen A. I know.
Yeah.
So it's anybody that's around him and sees the way that the guy prepares. Say what you will about his presentation style. Mm-hmm. It's certainly a style that's loud. And to your point about Aaron Rodgers and why you want to do it, and you were honest about that, right? Whether it's good or bad, it's attention.
Yeah.
And, it gets people coming back. Whether you like Stephen A.'s presentation style or not, it's loud, but it gets people coming back.
No question about that. You doing well otherwise? Everything good?
Everything's great.
Excellent.
Actually, we'll talk about this another time, but we launched a patient engagement program with the Winona Hospital System.
Oh, nice.
Up there in rural Minnesota back in January. Yeah, we presented some data at a health conference in Nashville a few weeks ago. But there's so much on that part of the story. I don't even want to move into that distraction right now. But really pleased with the results that we saw. And I joked when we presented this conference because we use this patient engagement program where we have an avatar of players talking about a person's health, right? Mm-hmm. It might say, hey, Dan, it's been 3 years since you had a heart health assessment. Click here if you want to take a health risk assessment. Click here if you want to schedule a screening.
Sure.
So we've had some great results that we've presented. And I joked, wow, wait until we use, people that have actually played in the last quarter century when we do these patient engagements. But it was awesome. It was the first pilot that we ran So really cool that it happened to be up there in Minnesota.
Well, remind me. Well, next time we'll definitely spend a little bit more time on that. Look, we always love the local angle here. Plus, I mean, I've certainly, what I've read indicates that the challenges when it comes to medicine in rural areas is getting more and more challenging. That's the idea, that there's not as many hospitals, there's not as many doctors, and that those are the places where there's a great deal of opportunity and need when it comes to these sorts of medical questions.
Yeah, no question. No question. Sorry for the phrase. You're absolutely right. And we went to a conference up in Minnesota back in October or so, maybe September. It's called Ascend Rural, and it talked about some of those specific issues, the isolation, access, not just to the information, but to the practitioners. And certainly telehealth has filled some of that gap. But it's always about engagement because people don't want to sit and read through a bunch of long PDFs, and they sometimes get tired of listening to practitioners tell them things. And we've kind of taken a different angle, right? So we're saying athletes and these influencers aren't necessarily the experts on these topics, but they understand the importance of getting engaged at the beginning. So if it's something that kind of pushes people just a little bit further in a direction that kind of gets them to the help that they need, then it's what we're all about.
Thank you, as always, my friend. We appreciate it. Stay well, and we'll be in touch. Thanks, Robert.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dan.
Appreciate you. That is Robert Smith joining us on the Fan. We'll come back and sort of calibrate the Salisbury answer to the question on whether the Vikings should actually entertain the Aaron Rodgers fantasy, and also Robert Smith's as well. Don't go away. All right, if you boil it down, I would say both of our Vikings guests, I was looking forward to this day, both of the former Vikings we've had on the show today, Sean Salisbury and Robert Smith, are saying no to Aaron Rodgers, right? Now, Robert, maybe even more than Sean, said, you got to consider it, and I wouldn't, refuse to watch the team if they did it, but in his case, he put it more on the quote-unquote culture issue, that he could not imagine a worse fit for what the Vikings think they've built in that regard under KOC.
Right.
And what Rodgers represents, which was very interesting. Not the same thing as saying he's not convinced Rodgers doesn't have anything left. But Smith, I think, said no. And I believe Sean Salisbury said no as well. For Salisbury, it was more, I'm just not sure there's enough left for me to accept all the drama that always comes with the Aaron Rodgers story. And we've talked about this the last few years. What's changed about Rodgers is he has enjoyed becoming a brand. And once upon a time, he might have been a pain, although, again, I don't know that he's always been a pain within a team. I don't know that he's been an unpopular teammate. I don't know that we have that many of those stories, but he developed a brand and kind of seemed to enjoy the show businessy aspect of, I got this whole other side here, and this is kind of fun. And I'll go on these national shows, and I'll make these strong pronouncements, and half the audience will love me and half the audience won't. But if I'm being honest and being fair, I would say both of them said no to Aaron Rodgers. Is that accurate, do you think?
That's how I read it. Yep. I agree. And I agree with both of them.
So you're back talked out of it again.
Yeah. I mean, the story is obviously the best part of it.
Yes.
There's the story and then there's the fan. Those are kind of two tracks, but it's pretty consistent. Most people just say, is that what you want to do when you've spent all this time establishing something? And especially even if you want to bring it to the football, stripping things down, getting rid of contracts, setting things up to have your rookie quarterback contract guy go play, and then bring this whole thing in there. It would be a lot. It would be entertaining. Like we said all week, it'd be great for us.
Yeah.
The bonuses would come in.
Well,
streaming numbers would be good.
Everybody's trying to interpret with all this delay. What does it mean? Does it mean it's less likely, more likely? I have no idea at this point. I would hope it would get resolved here fairly quickly. and then we could move on with the rest of our lives. A couple of good texts have come in while we were owing the late, great John Feinstein, the story breaking this morning that he collapsed at his brother's home, I believe, and has passed away at the age of 68 years old. I have no idea if there's been any discussion yet or any confirmation about what happened to him. I don't think he was ill. I do remember, because we've talked about it with him on the air. He's had at least one, I want to say maybe even two bypass, heart bypass operations in his past. And, so naturally your mind goes there, but we have absolutely no working idea. But we'll come back and read a couple of those interesting texts that came in, wrap up the show, remind you of what else you missed and what we have on tap for Friday.
Show Wrap is brought to you by American Pressure, commercial-grade pressure washer since 1975.
It's the bumper-to-bumper Show Wrap.
Well, I have the advantage of being a newspaper guy. So I'm used to writing fast and to writing on deadline and understanding that, because as a newspaper guy, that if you don't get it written, there's a blank space. It's not an option. I had an editor who used to say to slower writers on the paper, of which there are many at every paper, you're not winning the Pulitzer tonight. Just get it done. And so what I found, I learned two things doing Season on the Brink. I learned a lot more than that, but I had just read a biography of Ernest Hemingway. And in it, the guy said that Hemingway never stopped writing at the end of the day, at the end of a chapter, at the end of a section. He would stop in mid-sentence. So it was easier to start up the next day. Okay, here's where I am, and you get going, you get rolling a little bit. So I always followed that, and I found while writing the first book that if I pushed myself past a certain point, the writing was because I would always start the day by editing what I wrote the day before. And I would find the last 500 words or whatever were so bad that I just flushed them anyway. So I just made a rule that I would write until I felt tired, and didn't matter what the word count was, how far along I'd gotten in the story. When I started to feel, and you can feel it,
Sure.
that. When I started to feel myself dragging a little bit or starting to check the word count, maybe, time to stop. And that's what I've always done.
John Feinstein, another of many appearances with him over the years as we've attempted to do him justice today on the program in the wake of the news that he's passed away at the age of way too young, 68 years old. I will say, as someone who hasn't written now for 20 years, Feinstein hit on a key thing there. There's something about the deadline experience, right? Writing live on a night game that is invigorating. It's annoying because it's hard and it's frustrating, and if you're having trouble getting started, you feel like you're coming apart at the seams. But there is something about the vitality of that you got to get it. And as he said, if the page is blank, ain't going to do anybody any good. And there are days where you got to go, this ain't going to the APSC for top 10 today. Just grind something out. Stop laboring to the degree you did. But that goes back to as I said, the newspaper roots that he and I both share. Real quick, ode to a dead guy, texter from the 612 area code, met Feinstein twice at Hazeltine during the Ryder Cup. He was gracious both times. He wrote my favorite book of all time, a Civil War Army-Navy story. As a West Point grad, he was so grateful at telling that Army story. Shocking, and we will miss his appearances on your show. Michael checks in from Bloomington. Very sad to hear this news. A gut punch for sure. Respect, appreciation, anticipation, every segment with you. Yeah, he couldn't have been better with us, and basically gave us as much time as we needed, and we were happy to give him that time right back as well. If you're interested in the Minnesota Timberwolves, suddenly one of the hottest teams in ball, good conversation with Mike Conley to start the show. Sean Salisbury, his reaction to not just the Aaron Rodgers mystery, but the moves the Vikings did make in the National Football League draft. He is very high, not draft, in the free agency, very high on those moves, as we are. Russo Radio, kind of a tough edition of Russo Radio
Not
today.
as high on everything.
Now, I led him that way because I quoted from his very tough but very fair piece he co-wrote with Joe Smith that I think, answered, because some people said, well, it sounds like Russo's done with the Guerin 5-year plan. I don't think he's done with it. I think he's asking legitimate questions about how much confidence can we have at this point, given some of the moves to this point that, to a certain extent, have put the team further behind the 8 ball, that have not had the payoffs that we were looking for. That was between 4:30 and 5, and Robert Smith between 5:30 and 6 o'clock. There's some people disappointed that we didn't break down all the running backs in the draft. I got it. God bless you.
I'm not sure Robert's locked in on all that. And who cares?
And he might be. And there's time still to get to that. But with Robert Smith, we're interested in much bigger things. I'd rather hear him talking about his experiences with Stephen A. Smith, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Here's what we know, but let me boil it down on the NFL draft and running backs. There's a bunch of good ones. You can take one in the 5th round and feel like you got something. You can take one in the 3rd round and feel like you got something. Or you could take one in the 1st round like the Bears might do, and you'll have something. More detail than that, we'll get to it. There'll be plenty of time to get to all of that. It's not what we're interested in on this particular program. Tomorrow, I think it's the return of Lavelle, right?
Yes, he'll still be in Florida.
Oh, he is still in Florida?
Yes.
Okay.
Right now he's whining because he can't watch the state basketball tournament on his Xfinity on demand because he's not connected to his in-home Wi-Fi.
Oh.
Because he's in Florida.
He's in Florida.
Wobble bingo.
Well, there's a way you should be able to do that, no? From a distance, or no? Is it impossible?
It's not impossible, but it's not the way he wants to do it. He wants to just watch it for free.
Oh, happy for him.
And it's not working for him. And then
also,
Gessling.
Gessling tomorrow as well?
Yes, and Dr. Dan's inbox if we want.
That's right. Let's do it because we had such a busy schedule today. We'll move the inbox to tomorrow as well. And maybe get back to a little bit more about speculation on who the next Golden Gopher men's basketball coach might indeed be. What's coming up now? Fan and a Man in the Air?
And then Wild Rangers.
Wild Rangers tonight in the Fan. We'll talk to you at 3 o'clock.
PayPal lets you pay all your pals, like your graduation gifters.
Who's paying for the mattress topper?
You mean the beanbag chair?
Aren't we getting a mini fridge?
Can we create a pool on PayPal? It lets us collect the money before we buy.
Ooh, yes, that's smart.
Glad we can agree on something. Easily pool, split, and send money with PayPal. Get started in the PayPal app. A PayPal account is required to send and receive money. A balance account is required to create a pool.
Optimize your nutrition with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never-frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences, like Calorie Smart and Protein Plus. Factor's keto meals can help you lose up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks. Get started at factormeals.com/factor50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Weight loss with Factor Keto based on a randomized controlled clinical trial. Results will vary depending on diet and exercise.